We got off to a great start in our town hall series last week. We had former Congressman Rodney Davis, who comes from a McDonald's owning family, as well as former NLRB Chairman John Ring on our first town hall. And this week, I'm joined by three great experts on franchising. You see them on your screen in two different ways: Svetlana Gans, Tam Kennedy, and IFA's own Sarah Bush headlining today's program, in which we will dig into the role of the Federal Trade Commission. We made some fleeting references to the FTC on last week's program, and the FTC, we're going to dig in much deeper today. The FTC is the federal agency that enforces the franchise rule and is the primary agency that governs franchising nationwide. And we're going to discuss how it affects businesses like yours. And we're going to particularly focus today on the FTC's current request for information, otherwise known as an RFI, into franchise relationships. If you click on the QR code on the left on your screen, same pair of QR codes as on the previous screen, that's where you're taken to the RFI. That's actually a series of 75 questions. But you don't need to get bogged down with them. I don't know if anyone is responding to all 75 questions. But instead, for all of you busy running your own businesses, and again, we're grateful for your time here today, here is a suggested outline on your screen for a potential 4-paragraph response that could be very valuable in submitting right now and standing up for your business. In 4 paragraphs, you can simply, as it says on your screen, introduce your business and explain why you chose franchising as part of your small business story. You can write about how you and your fellow franchisees communicate with your brand to resolve issues and innovate, and perhaps even navigate a global pandemic whenever that arises, in order to remain competitive in your industry. And third, you can write about how and why you want to be autonomous as an employer, why it's important for you to be an independent business owner, and why you went into business for yourself, and how franchising accomplishes that for you. And fourth, you can write about how you don't care for government to negatively affect the equity, the investment that you've poured into your business through unnecessary regulation. What is the FTC? I think a lot of us have, if we read the newspaper, we've seen the FTC in stories with big tech or perhaps an antitrust case, but tell us about the FTC and what's generally going on there right now.
Sure. So the FTC was established in 1914 as a competition agency and later as a consumer protection agency. The FTC's main statute is Section 5 of the FTC Act, which prohibits unfair methods of competition on the competition side and unfair and deceptive trade practices on the consumer protection side. Historically, both of these missions focused on consumer welfare and consumer benefits, which has somewhat changed under the Biden administration, which I'll discuss later on. The FTC shares its antitrust jurisdiction with the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, and also shares some consumer protection enforcement activity with the CFPB, which is now run by Rohit Chopra. The FTC focuses on a bunch of things, from mergers and acquisitions to monopolization on the antitrust side. And then on the consumer protection side, they focus on privacy, advertising, marketing, and of course, the franchise rule.
Outstanding, very helpful. So what is unusual, if anything, about the current FTC, and what would you tell us about the current commissioners that are making decisions there for the agency?
So I've seen a significant shift in the approach of this FTC in 3 main buckets. 1 is policy changes, 2 is process changes, and 3 is rulemaking focus. Some examples of this are Chair Khan has centralized the power of the agency in her office. She has authorized individual commissioners to launch public investigations, non-public investigations of certain industries. There's been enhanced collaboration between the state attorneys general and the FTC. And the FTC has sought significant budget increases to the tunes of several hundred millions of dollars in order to ramp up enforcement and go beyond their statutory authority in several areas. To me, what really sticks out most are two things. One is the agency's now focus on workers and labor issues. And number two, their focus on rulemaking. So in terms of the focus on workers, it's really been a shift from its historical focus on protection of consumers. This all started earlier last year when the FTC changed its mission statement from the protection of consumers to the protection of the public at large. In addition, for decades, the FTC's mission statement stated that the FTC will go about its business without unduly burdening legitimate business activity. And under Chair Khan, the FTC removed that phrase from its longstanding mission statement, telling us, the public, that it has no qualms about legitimate business activity with its regulation. In 2022, the FTC announced a memorandum of understanding with the NLRB and has since participated as amici in several NLRB proceedings. The FTC's non-compete rulemaking really showcases its interest in expanding into labor markets, as the FTC expressed concern about business coercion of workers and harms to wages. And this RFI that we'll talk about later today really picks up this trend in multiple ways. It states that the FTC is interested in learning more about the means by which franchisors exert control over franchisees and their workers, and asks 6 specific questions concerning wages and workers. And all of these questions suggest that the goal of the RFI is to identify paths through which the FTC can advance the interests of franchise system workers rather than the franchise system itself. The second big policy shift, as I mentioned, is the focus on rulemaking. In the last 2 years, the FTC has sought to promulgate at least 7 consumer protection rules covering a whole host of topics, from earnings claims to service fees to subscription plans. And none of these rules really talk about how the consumer will benefit from additional rules, or how the small business community will be working through these rules in terms of the additional paperwork, the additional disclosure, and other burdens. So these are definitely areas to watch, and definitely a difference from when I worked there and historically in terms of the FTC's priority. In terms of, you asked about the current commissioners, as we know, Chair Khan is a very smart and ambitious lawyer. She was a protege of Elizabeth Warren and Rohit Chopra. She wrote the Amazon Antitrust Paradox while in law school, and also served in the House Judiciary Committee working on big tech issues. She has a different view on antitrust law and the role of government in the regulation of marketplaces. She wants the agencies to be more proactive in terms of not only enforcing existing law, but also changing the way the underlying markets function to make them more fair. So this is really a shift in terms of the role of government and the role of marketplaces to regulate themselves. One other note, Rekha Slaughter is a Democrat there, and Alvaro Bedoya is another Democrat. So right now the FTC has 3 Democrats and 0 Republicans. Both the Republicans recently resigned. Commissioner Bedoya is very interested in unionization issues and worker collective bargaining. And as I mentioned, there's just 3 Democrats, 0 Republicans. Commissioner Phillips, the Republican appointee, left in August of last year, and Commissioner Wilson left on Valentine's Day earlier this year in what she termed to be her noisy exit. You probably saw her op-ed in the paper. Commissioner Wilson, when she left the FTC, expressed grave concerns about Chair Khan's leadership, accusing Chair Khan of, quote, willful disregard of congressionally imposed limits on agency jurisdiction, her defiance of legal precedent, and her abuse of power to achieve desired outcomes, end quote. So there's been a lot of drama at the highest level at the FTC in the last several months.
Let's drill down on the franchise RFI. So I think if there's a theme of this discussion today, it's that there are and there always will be disagreements between franchise brands and franchise owners. But at the end of the day, we're all pro-franchising. It's a symbiotic relationship. Franchisors need franchisees. Franchisees need franchisors, or there's no franchising. So many of the comments, however, submitted to this RFI so far Svetlana, are not necessarily supportive of the franchise model. So what's your take? How much does this matter? Is this really a request for information, or is there something more intentional going on here?
So the FTC press release really makes clear that the agency is focused on unraveling the franchisor or franchisee relationship and has a negative bent and negative spin to the announcement of the RFI. It doesn't appear as though the FTC is viewing this with an open mind, which means that public comments are needed to a larger extent to try to convince the FTC not to engage in this burdensome rulemaking for the industry. As you know, the FTC oversees the franchise rule. The franchise rule is generally a pre-sale disclosure obligation where franchisors are required to provide various categories of material information to franchisees. Those categories are the nature of the franchise system, the franchisor's financial viability, the cost of operating a franchise, and so forth. So the idea there is to help franchisees make informed decisions of their investment to become a franchisee and to avoid deception by requiring franchisors to provide prospective franchisees with essential information prior to the sale. What's important about the franchise rule is that it does not regulate the franchisee-franchisor relationship. And it's important to remember that during the FTC's last substantive review of the franchise rule, it specifically stated that the agency was not well equipped to govern the specific terms and conditions between franchisors and franchisees, that it was outside of the FTC expertise. And even the franchise rule itself recognizes that there is some control between franchisees and franchisors in order to make the franchising model work. So right now what the RFI is seeking to do is go beyond the franchise rule disclosure obligations and go through the specific provisions of the franchising agreement to figure out where the FTC can do harm. They want to unravel the entire agreement and basically lay out a quote unquote fair playing field, which may not be a benefit to the franchise system. They're asking the public to basically submit anything about the franchise system that's wrong with the franchise system. It's a call for complaints. No complaint is too small, and the FTC's intention is to basically fix everyone's problems, whether it deals with how you source your product or how much you pay your workers. But the problem at the end of the day is that the FTC is not the right agency for this. It is not the Department of Labor. It does not have franchising experience. And that is why the submission of public comments is really important here to educate the FTC on what's really going on the ground with respect to franchising.
So Tam Kennedy, Taco John's franchisee, 39 years this year with the brand in one form or another. I started as a secretary making $4 an hour. Worked my way up through the company and bought it 17 years later. I'm pretty proud of all that we've accomplished with our brand in the Minneapolis-St. Paul market. Today, operating 6 restaurants day in and day out, representing our brand, representing my communities today on this call, and really focused, I think, on looking at the lifespan of my relationship in franchising and why today more than ever, it's important that a franchisee story be told in a balanced way, that we look at everything through a lens of what this business model has done for us and for our families and for our communities, I think, too. It's a partnership in the truest sense of the word. To let anybody else take your voice from you and use it as a way to group you into a response or a representation of what's happening in franchising is a mistake. It's the antithesis of what franchising is, right? We are all individual operators in multitude of brands. We reflect and represent our own business interests, our employees that we've brought on to work with us and develop in our neighborhoods. The things that we do in our communities really are a reflection of us as business owners. I always start with why I'm proud to be a franchisee. Why did I decide that I wanted to use franchising as a way to be a business owner? It is super important to me, right? I run my business as a family business. My son, my sister, Others in my family have worked in our company. And I think, you know, that's the goal. That was always my dream. I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. I wanted to have the honor of being a independent business owner. And I'm able to do that successfully by taking somebody else's really good idea, some structures and processes, and putting them in place in my neighborhoods. That is at the essence of my response, why it matters to me that I get to be my own boss.
Point one is self-explanatory, and it's your story, and your origin story about why you chose franchising and what that journey has been like for you. Point two really is just, you know, and I want to echo Tam's point on the role of franchisee associations and how enormously beneficial they can be to the health of a franchise system, and you know, a way for the system to innovate and maintain a competitive edge, have communications between the franchisees and franchisors, and really resolve things in a positive way. And part of what IFA is doing outside of this RFI and just the broader scope of all of the work that we're doing to improve the model is to really shift the narrative and educate franchisors on how beneficial franchisee associations can be in a franchise system. If your system doesn't have a franchisee association, just how you communicate with your franchisor, how other franchisees in the system communicate with your franchisor, even if it's informal and there's no advisory council or anything set up there. The third point is, again, just highlighting what Tim said, what it means to you to be able to create the corporate culture within your business, within your four walls, and the relationship that you have with your employees. My job in college was with a multi-unit franchisee in Texas, and it was it's still a global company, but it was such a great experience for me because it was a small business owner that had, you know, a dozen restaurants, and what that relationship means, particularly in the current labor market where there's a huge labor shortage and labor is tight. And then the fourth point is just, you know, why these practices are important, not to protect the franchisor, but to protect you and your business from other franchisees in the system that have the ability to hurt your business, hurt, you know, the relationship that you have in your community and the reputation that you've worked hard to build, because they're, you know, operating below what not only the standards, but below what the rest of the system is doing. So that's, I hope, kind of distills it down.
Start writing, open up the QR code, use the fan template, contact IFA offline. Let's get some comments submitted that are productive and more reflective of the franchisee experience as a whole.